listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach, and I help people who are engaging in anything they think counts as infidelity to deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. I firmly believe that you are entitled to guidance and support that respects the fullness of your humanity and the complexity of your situation, no matter what you're doing. So if you are ready to resolve your infidelity situation in a way that's truly right for you, let's work together. You can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I offer confidential, compassionate coaching via Zoom, so we can work together no matter where you're located. Okay, today we're going to talk about why it may be helpful at times to hold off on making decisions. That may sound like a contradiction of things I've said in the past on this podcast. If you've been listening for a while, you know I am a big fan of clear decisions. Decisions set us free. Decisions give us the opportunity to go all in on one thing or one set of things. Decisions give us the opportunity to dedicate our attention to specific things and relieve ourselves from focusing on other things. Being able to concentrate our energy is powerful. Sometimes it's great to be all over the place or to put our energy into different things, maybe many different things. Sometimes it's really wonderful and valuable to allow ourselves to disperse our energies. But there may be times in life when we don't want to do that anymore. In order to have certain kinds of experiences or get certain things done, we have to make decisions. And that means saying no to some things so that we can fully say yes to others. So decisions are great. That isn't up for debate. But that doesn't mean that we ever have to make decisions. And there may be times when attempting to make a decision just isn't the best use of our energy. And moreover, telling ourselves that we have to make a decision usually makes it much harder to make one. I'm going to explain what this can look like. And before I do that, let me offer a little context about the way I work with clients. The way my coaching practice is currently set up as I record this in September of 2022 is as follows. I offer clients an introductory coaching session, as you've heard me mention on the podcast many times. And usually after the intro session, the client and I decide it makes sense for us to continue working together. And the client then has the opportunity to purchase a package of 8-hour-long coaching sessions with me to be held at a frequency of usually once a week. If you want to check out my current pricing for these services, it's listed on the services page of my website, mariemurphyphd.com. And I should point out that the services I offer will change at some point in the future. So depending on when you're listening to this, things may be different, but you can always learn about the coaching I offer through the services page of my website. For now, though, the way it works is a client books an intro session, and then we may proceed with 8 coaching sessions. And I give most of my clients the option to renew their packages, and many do, which means I may work with folks for a total of 16 sessions after their introductory session, or 24 sessions, or maybe more than that, depending on what the client wants out of coaching. And that's important context for what I'm going to tell you next. Sometimes people come to the introductory coaching call and they're like, okay, I have this infidelity situation going on and I need to resolve it immediately, which means I have to make a decision about what I want right now. And in fact, it would be much better if I had made this decision yesterday, but since I didn't, I need to make it right this second. On the one hand, wanting to make a decision efficiently is kind of a great thing to want to do. But as you may perhaps know from your own experience, believing that we have to make a decision right fucking now usually feels pretty bad. Believing that we have to do something right away usually creates feelings like urgency and anxiety and pressure and panic and overwhelm. And it may seem like your situation truly is urgent and overwhelming and high stakes. Infidelity situations can seem like a really big deal. We may be living out a lot of conflicts and contradictions that we don't like. We may be doing things that we really don't want to be doing. We may have been carrying on like this for a while, and we may be very tired. We may want the whole thing to be over and done with one way or another for our own sake. And on top of that, we may have someone or someones in our life who really want us to make decisions about what we're doing with our relationships. And those people may be making their wishes very well known. And so we may feel like we have to do what they want us to do. And this can compound our feelings of panic and overwhelm and pressure and urgency and confusion and all the rest of that good stuff. Whether your sense of pressure or urgency to make a decision is internally generated through your own desire to make some changes or externally generated through someone else's insistence that you make changes doesn't really matter. Because really, when it comes down to it, all of our feelings are internally generated. Nobody else makes us feel pressured or feel a sense of urgency. We create that for ourselves. What matters is that when we tell ourselves we have to make a decision, especially if it's a decision we think is really high stakes, we usually freak out. We create pressure and overwhelm and panic and urgency when we believe we have to make a decision. And then, of course, when we're in those kinds of feeling states, it's almost impossible to make a decision. When emotion is high, intelligence is low. Now, it may seem like telling ourselves that we have to make a decision will actually motivate us to do so efficiently, but rarely does it actually work out that way. Quite simply, to echo what I've been saying already, when we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, it's really hard to think clearly. And that, of course, makes it harder to make a decision. And then we may beat ourselves up for not making a decision. And then we may believe that there's a big problem in our lives because we can't decide. And this creates a very unpleasant and unproductive cycle. And then in our very agitated state, we may think that the solution, the sole solution to our overall problem is to just make a decision. We think that if only we could just squeeze the decision out of ourselves, then everything would be fine, or at least everything would start to get better. And thus, the cycle continues. If this sounds like you, if you've been thinking that you have to make a decision about your infidelity situation ASAP, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is, if you're in a frenzied state of urgency, the chances of you making any choice at all aren't all that great. And the chances of you making a choice you feel really good about are even less great. If you want to make a decision that's truly right for you, you will need to slow down, right? And the good news is that's not really bad news. What is really going to happen if you take another week or another month or even another 6 months to decide what you want? Does the fate of nations hang upon your decision about your relationship stuff? Probably not. Yes, it may be uncomfortable to slow down and learn how to make sense of your emotions and examine your operating assumptions about your situation. But it's doing these things that will help you reach a decision that you are actually happy with. Sometimes we think that the only way to deal with a big conundrum is all at once. We may think we need a total solution in order to make our situation better. Or to put it differently, we may think that we need to eat the whole elephant in one bite. That's a pretty big mouthful. We can't eat elephant-sized things in one bite, but we can eat the proverbial elephant one bite at a time. So often, though, we don't want to take it one bite at a time. And the it can be any situation in our lives that's really bothering us. But of course, for our purposes, I mean your infidelity situation. When we've been dealing with a situation for a while that seems really hard and overwhelming, the idea of slowing down and taking it one bite at a time or dealing with it one step at a time can seem really unappealing because we're so overwhelmed by the whole thing and we just want the whole thing to go away in one fell swoop. We've been feeling so uncomfortable and we just want fast and complete relief. Here's the deal, people. I get it. I totally get it. There have been so many times in my life when I have wanted an instant and comprehensive solution to a seemingly impossible problem. And I actually have a few relatively minor situations like that in my life right now. I don't want to slow down and do the work to make change. I just want the change fairy to come along and make everything better for me. But I also know that A, the change fairy ain't coming, or to put it differently, I am the only change fairy that's coming. And B, I trust that the satisfaction I will gain from being willing to take on the task of making change for myself is what I really want. I might like the idea of easy change that I don't have to slow down and work for. I might like the idea of some magical fairy coming along to do the stuff for me, but I know that would at best bring me short-term relief. I know that the true win is being willing to grapple with my challenges and eat my elephants one bite at a time. And I want to suggest that that may be your best option too. Namely, to be willing to slow down, learn how to deal with the intensity of your emotions, and then take a look at your decision one piece at a time. This will require you to consider that your decision might not be as urgent as it is, and that might seem totally implausible to you. But even if it seems implausible, you can still consider why it might be okay to drop the urgency. Dropping the urgency doesn't mean you avoid your decision. It means you dedicate your energy to the decision-making process rather than to worrying about its outcome. When we attend to the process of decision-making, the outcome will come. And of course, it's helpful to remind yourself that if you really want to make a decision right this minute, you could. I'm not telling you that you have to slow down just for the hell of it. If time really is of the essence, then make a choice and commit to making the best of it. You could do that at any moment in time, but you don't have to. And I'll say more about that later. But for now, the point is that if you really don't want to slow down and let the dust settle and approach your situation from a different angle, you don't have to. Albert Einstein is often quoted as saying something to the effect of, "The kind of thinking that created a problem is not the kind of thinking that will enable us to solve the problem." What this can mean for today's purposes is that the kind of thinking that creates urgency or seemingly impossible decisions is not the kind of thinking that will allow you to make a decision. And this is where coaching comes in. Coaching gives you the tools you need to use your mind to solve problems rather than allowing your mind to run circles around you and keep you stuck where you are. If you are in the midst of an urgency freakout, the idea that in order to actually make a decision, you may need to slow down and let the dust settle may seem totally anathema or just plain impossible. You may not believe you can slow down, whether because you're so agitated or because the pressures to make a decision seem so very real and so very, very urgent. But what if you could? What if, just for today, you didn't have to make a choice? What if you could take the pressure off just for the rest of the day and consider that if you dedicate yourself to the process of making a decision and you allow yourself some time to do it, a decision can be made, right? I want you to consider that that might be possible. Okay. In contrast to people coming to their first session telling me that they have to make a decision right away, I also have clients who, after working with me for a while and systematically working towards making a decision, they say that they either don't want to make a decision about their infidelity situation, or they come to the conclusion that they can't make a decision about their infidelity situation. And I'm going to talk about each of these decisions in turn because they're both decisions. There are two interesting things about people deciding they don't want to make a decision about their infidelity situation. The first thing is that's actually a decision. If you decide you don't want to make any decisions about your infidelity situation, that usually means that you don't want to make any changes in what you are doing. And that is a choice in its own right. You're choosing to stick with the way things currently are. And I want to suggest that when that choice is made consciously, it can be a powerful, helpful choice. I believe that the best decisions are made when we want to make a choice, or when our desire to make a choice outweighs our desire to not make a choice, right? And part of what I help people do quite often is get clear on why they might want to make a choice, why it might benefit them to make a decision, to potentially help build their desire to make a choice. There can be a lot of benefits that come with making a decision, after all. But sometimes we decide that we're actually getting more benefits from sticking with the status quo than we think we would get from making a decision. And it's completely legitimate for you to choose to stick with the status quo, although my bias, as usual, is that it's better to make that choice consciously rather than unconsciously. Sometimes we prefer to just focus on living our lives and not making a decision, even if that means we don't resolve our infidelity situation and therefore means that we carry on with some activities we aren't totally comfortable with, or we live with some conflicts and contradictions for a while longer. Remember, you never have to make a decision. It may seem like you do, but in the absolute scheme of things, you rarely actually have to. There may be consequences to not making a decision, but that does not mean that you have to make one, ever. And sometimes, after working with me and taking a close look at their situation, people decide that they really prefer to defer making choices about the infidelity situation as a whole, and that's always your prerogative. Now, some people, after working with me for a while, say they can't make a decision. They've looked at all the things, we've systematically examined many aspects of their situation, and they say they still can't make a decision. And here's some tough love for you guys. When you say you can't make a decision, what that really means is you don't want to make a decision. And that's okay. You never have to make a decision, but you always can. And it's important to recognize that. You never need more information or more time or even more coaching. You could just make your choice right this second. Now, that doesn't mean you have to. You might want more time to, consider your priorities. You might want more coaching to help organize your thinking and deal with your feelings. But it's important to recognize that you could make a decision at any moment. If you've been trying to make a decision for a while and you've started telling yourself that you can't make a decision, or you've been telling yourself that you can't make a decision for a long time, I encourage you to empower yourself by considering that you could make a decision, but you're choosing not to. When we say we can't make a decision, we imply that forces beyond our control are preventing us from doing so. And is that ever true? I want you to entertain the possibility that it is not. And moreover, does it help you to believe that you can't make a decision? No. Well, that's not exactly true. Believing you can't make a decision may be a comforting thing to believe because it means you don't have to do anything. If it were true that you literally could not make a decision, then you're just stuck and there's nothing you can do about it. And that can feel very comfortable at times, or at least it may feel less uncomfortable than recognizing that you do have choices. Now, here are two common things that are going on when we think we can't make a decision. The first is a lack of certainty, or a supposed lack of certainty about what we really want. This is a sneaky one. Often we think that we aren't sure of what we want or don't know what we want, and that's just a fact. We think it's just a fact that we don't know what we want and that we can't do anything about it. But certainty is not something that falls out of the sky one day. Sometimes certainty comes to us without much effort, but often certainty has to be cultivated. And this can be done very consciously and intentionally, and sometimes that's the way it has to be done. But we may resist doing this for a lot of reasons, one being that if we were certain, we might have to do something. We might have to act on our certainty. I'm going to say a little bit more about that at the very end of the episode, but for now I'll say this. If you're resisting cultivating certainty, I want to suggest that you have two choices. You can decide that you aren't going to make a decision and make peace with that, or you can become willing to work with your resistance. Resistance may be annoying, but it doesn't have to be a stopping point. Resistance does not have to get in the way of you cultivating certainty about what you really want. It can just be a little hurdle that you have to jump over. The second thing that's often going on when we think we can't make a decision is we're afraid of what we think we will have to relinquish, or we're afraid of what we think we'll miss out on by making a choice. Here's the thing, people, you may well have to give up some things that you really value in order to make a choice about how you move forward with your infidelity situation and your romantic life. And it's important to examine what you value and think clearly about what you're willing to give up and what you aren't. But there isn't really any way to get around the fact that relinquishing things that we value can be fucking sad. When we make a choice and relinquish some things that are important to us, there may be sadness and loss and grief and maybe some doubt and bewilderment and maybe even some agony. Sometimes letting go of things we're attached to comes with a lot of intense emotions. And this can be true even when we are sure that we are making the decision that is best for us. And this doesn't have to be a problem, but we usually make it one, or at least we often make it one. Often, we fear the experience of these kinds of emotions before we even start to actually experience them. And to echo something I've said many times before on the podcast, I don't think that's unreasonable, given that very few, if any of us, have ever learned how to tolerate and even befriend our most uncomfortable emotions. But what we're effectively doing by fearing discomfort in the future is creating discomfort in the present. Funny how that works. By anticipating how hard it might be to let go of the things we may need to give up if we make a particular choice, we're making ourselves feel unpleasant emotions in real time. So in other words, we may think the problem is in the future, but it's actually right there in the present. Our superpower lies in being willing to deal with our feelings as they come up in real time, even when they're uncomfortable. We can't deal with feelings in advance by anticipating them. And we can't entirely avoid quote unquote negative or uncomfortable emotions, although we can reduce unnecessary suffering by actively managing our thinking. So one of our biggest opportunities lies in being willing to tolerate and befriend our emotions, and then actually doing this again and again and again. putting our willingness to tolerate our big emotions into a practice of actually doing so is where the rubber hits the road. I can't emphasize this enough. A lot of people tell me things like, oh, I know, I get it. I know that no matter what I choose, there's going to be some sadness and all of that stuff. I know I'm going to feel bad in some ways, no matter what I do. And I'm totally okay with that. And to that I say, really? Are you really okay with all of that? If you're so okay with feeling sadness and all of your other uncomfortable emotions, then none of the things you think you might have to relinquish if you make a decision need to get in the way of you making a decision. If you really trust that you can deal with your feelings, you can give up anything. Now, just to be clear, let me reiterate, I'm all in favor of you carefully considering what you're willing to give up and what you aren't. I'm all in favor of you taking a close look at your fears. This is important. But beyond a certain point, if you aren't willing to actually feel the emotions associated with letting something or some things go, you just aren't going to get anywhere. Letting go, quote unquote, is not just an intellectual exercise. It's also a practice of being willing to feel and work with our emotions on an ongoing basis as they come up. Now, all of that said, here's a little plot twist for you. There may be times when intentionally dealing with a bunch of uncomfortable emotions simply isn't a project we want to take on. For example, sometimes people come to me and they're like, yeah, one of my parents just died and I'm devastated about that. And I'm dealing with some major health stuff and I'm really scared. And I'm changing careers and that's really stressful. And I'm also worried about all of these other things. And I'm totally overwhelmed and exhausted by all of this. And oh yeah, I have to resolve my infidelity situation right now. That's really important. Here's the thing. Sometimes we have a lot of major stuff going on in our lives all at once, and we kind of have to juggle all of it simultaneously as best as we can. That can be a thing. But it's also true that we usually have more choices about what we contend with at any given moment than we think, right? When we think we have to take on all the things, we're usually wrong. So to that effect, if you are contending with a lot of major life stuff, there's nothing that says that you shouldn't prioritize addressing your infidelity situation. You could, and that might be exactly what you want to do. But in order to make significant changes in any area of your life, you really do have to focus your time and energy and effort on that area of your life. And since we all have limited bandwidth, focusing on one thing means devoting less of your time and energy to other areas of your life. And it's important to be judicious about how we use our energy. If we have a lot of stuff going on that all seems really important and or urgent to us, or we have a lot of stuff going on that involves really heightened and potentially very uncomfortable emotions, we want to deliberately prioritize what we want to address, and we want to make some really clear choices about what we're willing to take on. And it may be that addressing your infidelity situation is your top priority, but it also might not be. Maybe it's more important for you to just deal with your career change first. Or maybe it's more important to really focus on your health, or to give yourself the opportunity to grieve your parents' death. All of the things may be important, but that doesn't mean it's all urgent, and it certainly doesn't mean you should try to do them all at once. Similarly, although it's important to recognize that whether or not something is quote unquote hard is a matter of your thinking, it is also okay for you to decide that you're not going to do something because you think it's going to be too hard or too scary or too much or too overwhelming or too whatever, and you just don't want to take that on right now. There's a little bit of a paradox here, but that's okay. We can all embrace paradox. On the one hand, we do need to be aware that in order to get what we want in life, There will be times when we will have to willingly do things that seem hard or scary or inconvenient or impossible or whatever. If we want to live out our fullest lives, it doesn't serve us to indulge in thinking that creates feelings like overwhelm and fear. And if we want to make big changes in our lives, it doesn't serve us to avoid feelings like overwhelm or fear, or to say that things are too hard or too scary or too much, right? But it is also true that there are times in life when the most important and appropriate thing is to be gentle with ourselves and not challenge ourselves. Sometimes we really need to withdraw and seek out comfort. Sometimes attempting to do hard things, as they say, is the best thing for us. And sometimes it's the worst thing for us. If you have been through a bunch of stuff that has been really challenging for you, you may need to hit the pause button and practice resting. And that may include deciding that you are not going to make a decision about your infidelity situation for a while because you just don't have the fortitude for it. You may need to replenish the gas tank before you try to take on the project of making a decision about your infidelity situation, and that's okay. There's a time to hold ourselves accountable, and there's a time to allow ourselves to pause or withdraw or retreat or rest. And our humanity depends on us being able to do both of those things. Okay. If you have been stewing for a while, if you've been telling yourself that you have to make a decision for a while, but you aren't actually doing that, I have 2 suggestions. Number 1, as I said earlier, consider the possibility that you are choosing to not make a decision right now. And consider telling yourself that over and over. Consider saying to yourself, I'm choosing to not make a decision right now. Assuming responsibility for not making a decision might seem like a blight on your character of some sort. But what if it isn't? What if it's a perfectly legitimate choice to make? And what if recognizing that you're making a choice and owning that is far more empowering than carrying on with believing that you can't make a choice? I highly recommend that you try this out. If you've been telling yourself that you can't make a choice, try telling yourself that you're choosing not to make a choice and see how you feel. See what happens. Similarly, if you've been telling yourself that you have to make a choice, try telling yourself that you have the opportunity to make a choice, or you have the option to make a choice. See what happens when you shift your thinking this way. My second suggestion, if you have been telling yourself for a while that you have to make a decision but haven't done it yet, or you've been telling yourself that you can't make a decision, is that you intentionally put your decision on the shelf. If you really think you can't do it, maybe you just want to put the project down for a while. Now, when I say put your decision on the shelf, I really mean put it on the shelf. I mean, you make a conscious decision to stop fucking ruminating on whatever your decision is, and you get busy being present in your life, and you actively attend to other matters that you've prioritized. This can be incredibly helpful. Sometimes a problem can't be solved at the level of a problem. Thank you, Einstein. Sometimes we just need to go and do something else, and that works out well. The irony here, of course, is that people often think that they can't put their infidelity situation on the shelf because they haven't made a decision yet, right? And this gets us back into the same chicken and egg problem that I talked about earlier. We think we have to make a decision, and that creates a sense of urgency, and then it's harder to make a decision. So we freak out more and we essentially stay put. Intentionally putting a decision on the shelf will almost certainly require you to actively manage your mind to avoid defaulting to ruminating on your situation, but that is possible. This is something that you can do, and I can teach you how to do it. Now, to be clear, putting a decision on the shelf is not the same as putting a decision off. It's a conscious decision to take a break for the sake of letting the dust settle. And if you've gotten lost in a dust storm of indecision and urgency and you can't find your bearings, this may be exactly what you need to do. Here's the one last thing I want to say about decisions today. Making a decision does not mean you then have to take action in the service of your decision in any particular time frame. Sometimes people are afraid that if they make a choice, they'll have to do something about it immediately. You don't have to. Making a decision and taking action in support of that decision can be two distinct steps in your journey. And there may be a few steps in between taking action and making a decision. There's more I could say about that, but I'll save that for another time. The point for now is don't allow your fear of taking action to be your excuse for not making a decision. Okay, everyone. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you want my help applying what I talk about on the podcast to your own life and the specifics of your situation, let's work together. You can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I can't wait to meet you. Okay, everybody, have a great week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.